in the 80s is comparable to what the Soviets are using on their ships in the 80s. And I have to assume, although I'm not familiar with any missile tests against armor, I have to assume that if the Navy was using 3 inches of armor plate, that they thought that that was about what it would take to deter a cruise missile. So, let's get down to the battery. Starting from the guns, the Kirovs have a couple different gun batteries. Kirov herself had 4 4-inch guns. The other ships in the class had 2 5-inch guns, 5.1s, 130 millimeter. Iowa-class battleships, of course, 9 16-inch guns, and in the 80s, 12 5-inch guns. The Soviet guns are more of an automatic system, a modern system, whereas the Iowa's 5-inch guns require somewhere like 40 guys between the gun mount and the magazines. So that is a significant resource investment there. But having 6 5-inch guns on a broadside means if we get into gunfighting range with a Kirov, that's a no contest. And something has gone horribly wrong if Kirov chooses to get within gunfighting range of an Iowa. Before we go any further, Kirov herself was laid down in 1980. Her next sister ship in 84, the next one in 88, and then another one not until 98. So the 4th member of the class didn't even get commissioned before the end of the Cold War. A 5th unit in this class was authorized but never laid down or completed. The problem was they were building these ships at one yard, so they had to wait until one was launched to roll out the next one. And so even the U.S. Navy reactivated its Iowa-class battleships in at least 2 different yards, which meant that we could do some of that work simultaneously. And so, by the time the U.S. Navy has reactivated Wisconsin, now has 4 Iowas in service in 1988, the Soviets are just laying down their, or are just commissioning their 3rd Kirov. And these are only going to be 1 in any given operating area because the Soviets have so many different areas of responsibility between the Black Sea and the North Atlantic and the Pacific and the Baltic. Part of the gap between 1980, 84, 88, 98 was the Soviets also used Kirov hull to build Ural, which was a very different type of ship, but it used the same hull, built in the same place, and so it slowed down production of the true battle cruisers. So there were 6 of these hulls initially planned, 5 of them were completed, only 3 of them as actual fighting ships during the era of the Soviet Union. And I'm referring to these as Kirov-class battle cruisers throughout. When the Soviet Union collapsed, they were all renamed, and they all have modern names that they use.
Torpedoes to port.
I'm not going to try and go through all of the original names and all of the new names. You can look that up online. So, the Soviet Sea Whiz. They have 8 AK-630s on the earlier 2 ships. These are roughly comparable to the 4 phalanxes that the Iowas get. The Soviet Union tends to group their Sea Whizzes in pairs because they're less sophisticated. And so they're putting more rounds on target, and it's more likely that they'll get a hit. So their 8 AK-630s really does match up pretty well with the 4 phalanxes that New Jersey has. Also, they are 30 millimeter, whereas ours are 20 millimeter. And really, it's a 20 millimeter Sabo round, or an 11 millimeter depleted uranium core. And part of this is very similar to the discussion we've had a number of times on this channel of armor. You armor your ship against the size guns that you have. In the 80s, a 20 millimeter round is enough to shoot down a Harpoon or a Tomahawk cruise missile. The Soviets have some much larger missiles, and so they're using a much larger round to put it down, the 30 millimeter. The later 2 ships have 6 mounts for this Kashtan system, which is a combination of 2 Gatling guns and 2 quadruple missile launchers. So that system mostly antedates the Iowa class, so we're not really going to talk about it here and comparing them in a fight, but it is a much more modern and much more effective system than the Sea Whiz, in my opinion. The American Phalanx Sea Whiz. The American Navy has rolled out the rolling airframe missile, but that is a separate mount from the Phalanx Gatling gun, and so only some of our large ships have both types. So the fact that the Soviets have mounted this in a single gun system, and also it's modular, so you put in a control pod, and then you can put in as many weapons modules as you want around your ship.